It began as a whisper on the trading floor, the sort of rumor that lacked sense but spread much too quickly to shake the most experienced brokers. An unknown hedge fund, Orion Capital Strategies, then suddenly entered the market taking bets so huge that it distorted whole sectors of the U.S. economy. Within a week, Orion was able to inflate the value of unheard-of tech startups and devalue the stock valuation of decades-old blue-chip corporations. It appeared to most observers of the markets as another round of algorithmic trading, one of those wild bounces that can be attributed to high-frequency firms conducting experiments. However, it did not look to Evan Mercer, a forensic accountant who had a former career in the FBI, like a glitch. It looked like a setup. It was 5 years since Evan had last been in federal offices. He had departed after a sloppy affair with corporate fraud, the sort of thing that was publicized but buried in closed settlements. He also had taken private assignments since then, auditing hedge funds and corporations who needed to look like they were transparent. Orion Capital found his way to his desk by a peculiar route, a letter, without an envelope, and without an address or a signature. Just a note: follow the trades. The reality lies right before your eyes. The activity of Orion was initially impossible to detect. They were not trading, they were prophesying. Any move they made resulted in profit within hours, even minutes. Firms not yet reporting income, not yet making any noise, simply went in precisely the direction that Orion had bet. It seemed like a certain visionary at Orion could look into the future, but Evan knew better. In finance, the future was not anticipated. It was leaked. Transaction timestamps analysis gave him his first lead. Orion was not merely trading, but they were taking advantage of market-moving information seconds before it was released to the market. It was inside information at a scale he hadn't encountered before. However, when he looked at the SEC filings of the company, Orion existed on paper at the most. No executive names, no physical office, only a shell company incorporated in Delaware, the black hole of corporate where billions of dollars vanish. Evan chose to put his feet in the water. He tracked the banking lines of Orion and traced their clearinghouse data. The wires were moved offshore where they rolled and rolled among accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and finally lodged in a small bank in Estonia. Ironically, that bank had been marked as engaging in money laundering by U.S. regulators. And yet Orion was spared in transfers, almost like somebody was on their side. The further he excavated, the more unfamiliar it became. Some middle-rate contact at the SEC whom Evan had known in his bureau days advised him to desist. "It is not insider trading like this," the man replied on a scrambled call. "They are plugged into something larger. One of those you do not want to be anywhere near." But Evan couldn't stop. Not when the figures began to signal a chilling prospect: the fact that Orion was not a hedge fund. It was a front. On a dismal Thursday evening, the breakthrough came. Evan was sitting in his one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan with 3 screens on, with cold coffee, when a single name was found in several datasets. Halcyon Systems, a defense contractor and specialist in cybersecurity and satellite communications. He was rebuilding the largest trades of Orion. Orion had been gambling on Halcyon weeks earlier when the company had announced a billion-dollar Pentagon contract. It wasn't just lucky timing. One of the people inside Halcyon had fed the information to Orion. Evan checked the executive board at Halcyon. His stomach turned then. Alan Rourke, a former Treasury official and once a witness before Congress on the hazards of capital flows that cannot be traced, was also a board member. The same Rourke who had gone into hiding 3 years ago, leaving overtures about corruption. Now he was back, and he was laundering billions of dollars in markets without so much as a fingerprint. Evan had to be careful. Had Rourke been implicated, it wasn't merely financial fraud. It was political, and political fraud was apt to wipe people away who asked too many questions. He began saving his results offline, making hard copies and putting them in a safe deposit box under an alias. He even typed out a copy and gave it to a friend in Boston, asking him to publish it in case he vanished. Even paranoia could not help him in what was to follow. One night, as he was coming home late in the evening, Evan spotted that his door was locked, but it had been forced in. His instincts, of his days in the FBI, froze him as he saw inside the apartment undisturbed and discovered his monitors off his desk. He never turned them off. Whoever came in had made away with nothing. They had to make him realize that they could get in touch with him. The next morning, Orion ceased his trades. Completely. Like the fund itself had never been created. No filings. No wire transfers. Nothing. They had wiped themselves out of history overnight. But markets don't forget. There was still a rippling as billions had moved due to Orion. Small investors were wiped out. Corporations destabilized. Pension funds bleeding money. Somebody had wringed riches out of the system and disappeared. Evan knew what this meant. Orion was a test run, a demonstration. Now where Rourke and his network were allowed to control markets as they wished, they could destroy financial stability with an inside-out job. It wasn't just greed. It was control. The final clue Evan discovered was a coded file within a trading caliber of Orion. Hiding within lines of code was one phrase, Project Echo, and a date. 6 months from now. He did not know what it was, but he knew the size. Orion hadn't disappeared. They were waiting. And it wouldn't be only billions next time. It would be the system itself. Evan Mercer did not know whether he was fitted to follow those again. But he knew one thing. If he didn't, nobody else would. And when the date came, the financial future of America would never be the same.